Welcome back to another episode of the Erickson Brothers podcast, where we talk about the questions we do not know the answers to and the possible returns of life's investments. My name is Jeff Erickson. I'm one of your hosts today, here with my older brother, Matt Erickson, where on this podcast, we talk about things like our faith, our family, our fitness, our finances, and our fun. Matt, bro, how you been? How's everything going?
It's good. We're doing this on a Friday afternoon, which we haven't done before. So again, a little bit different perspective going into it, but yeah, it's closing off the week, starting the weekend, and going from there.
Yeah, we're really hitting our listeners with a proper mix of consistency and inconsistency.
Yes, yeah, it's it might throw everybody's routines off, but I think they'll be able to manage.
Yeah, I think they'll adapt well. But you said just pretty typical week for you. Is everything at the office kind of coming into full swing with end of the year approaching, or what would you say there?
Uh, yeah, people are. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of talk around uh, a recession, but also strong numbers in the economy, and now oil prices going up. So people think that they're going to raise rates again by the end of the year. So there's a lot of conversation around that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that more people issue debt, but it was definitely busy the past few weeks. We'll see what the end of the year looks like. But
Yeah, I had the privilege of filling up my tank in the Camry for $6.15 a gallon here in sunny San Diego, California. So
no way.
that was fun to put $85 in a 16-gallon tank.
Yeah, I just get out and push the car at this point. That's
I'm, I'm thinking of biking to work down the highway. I'm joking. I'm joking. But yeah, no, I didn't even know like I mean obviously oil prices go up and down, but um yeah, they go up in California first before it feels like everywhere else.
hmm hmm yeah. I think I don't. This time, I think it's just because there's supplies or demand is outstripping supply, and the price is finally catching up. But I think this has been the dynamic for a while. Um, but anyway, what did you have in mind, and what have you been thinking about this week?
Yeah, got a super cool quote for you, something that's kind of just been on my mind in terms of um, just a perspective I've had just around work. And I'll read this quote. Your work works on you more than you work on it. We work in order to become rather than to achieve. The accomplishment is fleeting, but who we become lasts. So your work works on you more than you work on it. What do you think?
That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, I'll read the second part. Right.
No,
So,
I know what you said, but what would how would you explain it?
so I think that in order to like through working hard and through being disciplined in your work, you're going to learn the character traits and you're going to turn into the person that is successful. And that's actually going to be more valuable. Like the person you become through doing the work is going to be more valuable than the actual result of that work itself.
Okay, so
So,
give me an example.
so for example, this month has been really good in business and I've been working a bunch and I've had to learn a lot of new skills, right? New sales skills, persuasion skills, um, leadership skills, talking in groups on Zooms and whatnot. And the skills that I learn from being so deeply embedded in my work right now are going to be more valuable than the results that I get more this month.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think like the work I'm putting in this month is actually, it's molding me and it's turning me into the person that's going to be better, instead of like me working on the actual work. Like it's just a
Yeah.
different mindset shift. And it's something I just like have in my head because it's something I find super fascinating.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of things are like that. As you do them, you get better at them, and the next time you do it, you're better at it, and it's a compounding effect of the of your output because you yeah, that, like you said, the work you're doing makes you better at the work you're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it gets into that infinite game versus finite game
Oh,
proposition,
so
and
true. Yeah, so
and
true.
um, just having that around, yeah, that mentality around it, but 100%, um, because we want to do things to get better at them, and or either by requiring less effort or less time, less capital, and uh, that's why we do it. That's how we provide value, is doing it better over time. So
Mm-hmm.
that's great.
Yeah, the infinite game. I mean, that's so powerful when it comes to like personal development and like valuing the person you're becoming in the process. Because like the finite game mentality is like I'm only going for the result this month, and like what can I get out of like what I'm doing right now to like get that win. And like although it is important to be tracking and growing your progress throughout the way, it's like the person you become in the whole process of your development that is actually going to be what's going to be more valuable. And something that is, I think, more rewarding long term is the person you are that is going to be the person that achieves the goals, not the actual goals themselves.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, those, I think those go hand in hand. Um, you can't have one without the other, and I would say both are important. I'd say that the the destination is important. It's like you can enjoy the journey, but you got to know where you're going. And if you are on if you're just walking along on a journey to be on a journey, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it does matter if you get there or not. It does matter if you're able to produce results when the
Mm-hmm.
time comes. I was um, talking about this with a coworker, and at the time I made the baseball analogy, but I'll make the work analogy as well. Here is like you're closing the deal, getting the partner, making the money, doing the task, whatever it was. It Nobody cares how long it took you, how you did it, or what. It just matters, did it get done uh, on time? Did it get done on the deadline? And whether you were in in the case now, a lot of people work from home versus at the office. And there's a push for people to go into the office more. It's like it doesn't really, in my mind, it doesn't really matter if you go into the office or not. You have to get the deal done. You have to do what works for you. In baseball and in sports, like when you grab a baseball and you're throwing it and you're pitching it and you're pitching it to the catcher, the baseball does not know how many baseballs you've thrown before that. It doesn't know how much how much you can squat. It doesn't know how much you spend on your cleats and your glove. The only thing the baseball knows is the ball coming out of your hand at the last second. And the work you put in the weight room, the drills you do, that all matters to affect it. But the ball in that moment does not matter um, what that was before. So I think uh, both matter. Like I said, the preparation, the journey, the the person you become along the journey, that matters. But I'd say that the destination, the output, the result, though, you can't forget about that. Um, so
Yeah, love that, dude. I think that's great. Um,
mhm.
the ball doesn't care how many reps you do. It just cares what the
Yeah,
result is.
yeah.
Uh,
It's like some people say, like, "Oh, I deserve this promotion. I deserve to be on this team because I spent this many hours in the weight room, or I came in, or I spent this much time in the office." It's like, no, it's like when you stepped to the plate, or when you got on the mound, or when you were on the free throw line, or when you were in front of the client, did you get the deal done? Yes or no? And that's it.
mhm.
That's what matters. So,
Cool. Love it.
mhm,
Love it. Love it. Yeah, all the perspective shift stuff, dude. I think that helps a lot with me in terms of actually um like having like a meaning to what I'm doing is like how I view what it is that I'm doing. So like these kind of conversations help a lot with actually like getting better results and like wanting to be
mhm,
motivated to have that long-term vision. So I love it. Cool. Topic
mhm.
number two. What do you got for us?
So the uh, Tuesday night is Bible study night for me, and we've been. This is the second year I'm doing it, since being in the city, so I know all these guys now. And um, I'd say first off, it's just great the great knowing people, um, and having like solid relationships. It's just I love these guys, and it's nice coming back after we had this summer break. It's nice coming back and knowing almost everyone there and building off of those relationships. And I've been seeing a lot of these guys over the summer and going golfing or going playing basketball or going to church. And now there's so much more to build off of than there was when I started going to this Bible study last year. Um, anyway, one of the one of the guys at this Bible study, he was talking about a saying that one of his friends um, loves, and directly translated, um, it's the so launch out. Okay, so the Greek word, I don't know if it's Greek or Latin, but it's directly translated to English. It's just go out into the deep, launch out into the deep, and it it is said in the Bible in Luke when Jesus comes to the shore, and um, I believe Peter and James were out fishing, and then uh, they're not catching any fish. Jesus says, "Oh, cast your nets into the other side, launch into the deep," and then they catch the fish. Their nets break. Blah blah blah. So the what's been on my mind this week about that translation is that you have to be willing to go out into the deep, and you have to cast your net on the deep side of the boat. You have to go, and you have to pursue things more intensely, at a deeper level than what you're necessarily comfortable with, and that's how you get results. And it it also coincides with a quote from Breaking Bad, or I heard it on Breaking Bad, but I don't know if it's from Breaking Bad. But uh, Walter White tells tells his, I forget his name, whatever his name is, but he says like no half measures, and it's just a something that I've thought about. Whether you're launching into the deep, no half measures, whatever it is just committing to something and then being great at it and taking that risk that will allow you to get results. Because nobody ever caught any fish in the shallow water.
Is
Nobody.
would you say the deep is the unknown? Like, what would you how would you describe the deep?
I would say the deep is just taking the risk, um, and taking the risk and pursuing something fully. Um, because once you're like with this water analogy, like you're in the deep, you're out in the ocean, you're surrounded by unknown, you're surrounded, there's the water's unknown, you're not close to shore, whatever it is. But that's where you catch the fish and that's where you reap the results. So I've been thinking about that in my own life, like how I can like go into the deep, and I think it also applies to like our lives spiritually, and saying like pursue God relentlessly, go into the deep, get intentional with pursuing Him, because that's where there's growth. And it's easy to be in the shallow water. It's easy to live idly, but it takes intentionality and it takes risk and it takes sacrifice to go into the deep. Um,
Is it like almost like no plan B, like burn the boats mentality?
not necessarily cut off all the options, but just but commit to what you're doing and accept risk into your life.
Mm.
And I think that there you're allowed to you're allowed to fail, but you're not going to succeed in just being idle. So that's what I've been thinking about. And
Yeah,
mhm.
interesting. So I just thought of this. So you related it to faith in the fact that like almost like going into the deep is like that relationship with God, like trusting in Him, like even though there are
Mhm.
unknowns, even though you don't know everything, like
Yeah.
you have to make the risk. And I think that's fascinating. I just thought about this because like the only known, at least in my life with the faith that I have, is that I'm going to heaven. Like that's one of
Yep.
the only knowns that I have. And
Yeah. It's
it's
the
almost
only.
like it's almost like you're pursuing as you pursue a relationship with God, you have more unknowns temporary, but you're locking in the long-term goal. Am I
The long
understanding? Like am I like this is like
the
the
long
first time I've
term
ever thought about this.
the long term known
The long-term known.
versus
Yeah,
the short term unknowns.
that's good.
Um, yeah, I mean
Wow.
that is good. I don't know. I, I don't necessarily know if pursuing a relationship with God leads to more short term unknowns, but you
I think it
definitely
does.
worry less. Like those matter. The short term unknowns matter less and less, and the long term known is the only thing that matters.
Hmm.
And like if you were to flip the script and live in a very like a what we talk about a lot, like a finite game of like this earth is the only place we will ever be, or the like what I'm doing this week and right now, this week, this month, this year, like that's the only things you're thinking about. The you one one person could end up thinking about those short term unknowns more than those long-term knowns. And like
Mhm.
I think if those short-term unknowns become so much more consuming in your life, that's when like a lot of like anxiety and stress and all of that kicks in.
That's good. Like this is, that's really fascinating to think about. And I really like that. Like I'm gonna journal about that tomorrow. I want to
Mhm.
think about this more because it's like it's so applicable, but I've never heard it described this way before, and
Yeah, me neither.
I like
Which
it.
is yeah, the short-term unknowns versus long-term knowns. So I'm trying to
Oh,
think like
I have another thought. So a there could be like two things that we know for sure are true about, like especially as we have our faith in God and like we accept Jesus into our life and all that. There's two things we could have that are for sure's is the long-term known and like the long-term security in our destination, but then like almost just as guaranteed is like that short-term unknown. So it's almost like when we lock in like that long-term destination, it's almost like we admit to us not knowing the answer, and like we admit to having to trust and like needing the faith. So it's like knowing that we're walking down the path and knowing that we're not going to be, or like not knowing what the next steps are going to be. So it's like we know that
yeah,
we're going to have the unknowns. It's like, does
yeah.
that make sense?
It does. No, that's another great point. I think that you you lock in a life of just like stewardship and serving, being salt and light of the earth, and like bringing yourself to God and being like, hey, like I'm gonna follow you. Like take me wherever. Take me into the deep. Like
Mm-hmm.
take these short-term knowns, short-term unknowns. Like there's a lot of them, but like I am fully um I'm fully like denying myself and going to whatever God has for us.
Dude,
And just
sorry, keep going.
yeah, so it's it's very interesting.
Like if you think
Um,
about like Jesus's life, like what's like throughout his life, I'm guessing really the only thing that he really knew for sure is that his father, like God, was going to take care of him and that he was going to end up back in heaven.
well, he also knew Jesus might be different because he was God and he knew he told prophecies of him dying and being raised 3 days later and then like going to heaven.
But like,
So
so
he did know
he
that.
didn't know that. But like at the same time, if you look at like the Last Supper, like in the upper room after there's communion, what Jesus did after the Last Supper is he went off to the garden by himself. And he knew what was coming the next day. And they talked about like how he was like sweating blood. He was in so much, like, he was so scared and like he was so afraid of what the next day was going to come that he was sweating blood. And he asked God in his prayer, he said, God, is there any other way? Like, can we do this any other way? And that was like what he prayed to God. And God was like, no. So like he did know that's what he was doing, but like at the same time, like he wanted like it wasn't something, it was like he still had the man in him that was like, man, like this is gonna be tough. Like I don't want to have to do this if I don't need to. Um
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. There. I mean, he was fully man. It is an interesting story. It is the craziest story ever told.
ever told.
The but back to these short term unknowns, long term knowns, like that. It is very interesting. I think that like you could say that society is caught up in the short term unknowns, and that's what leads to like a lot of these problems we have. But I'm trying to think for me personally, where am I focusing too much on short term unknowns and trying to make them into short term knowns? Because
Mm,
that's that's playing a finite game, and um, it's not trusting that whatever God has for us is is there. So yeah, I could say like job. Like right now, it's a like I have my job, but like what I'll be doing in next year, 5 years, 10 years, blah blah blah. It's a short term unknown, and it can consume my thoughts into not thinking about the long term known of I am a child of God. I believe in Jesus. I'm going to heaven, and there's constantly going to be a battle of just our human condition to worry, or the sometimes it is it is the devil coming and saying like, no, we're not going to focus on your salvation. You're going to try and I'm going to try and make you doubt your friendships. I'm going to try and make you doubt your self-worth, all that. And I'm going to try and turn all these short-term unknowns, and I'm going to try to make you think about turning them into short-term knowns.
Or long-term unknowns. Like the devil might try to like turn our short-term unknowns to long-term unknowns too.
What would be that?
Well, like, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my next bill. Like, is God really real? Like, is he really looking after me? Like, is he really somebody that's like, I don't like if you don't see him this week, you might like the devil might try to convince you that he's not there for you. And that like, like that whole poem of like the footsteps in the sand.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, God, like during my hardest points, like there's only one set of footprints. And it's like, oh, actually,
Mm-hmm.
that was when he was carrying you. So almost to that fact where like the devil would almost try to convince you that like the short term unknowns is going to lead to long term unknowns, but don't let that happen. Is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was listening to a podcast, same podcast I've talked about before, just Harris Creek service, and the pastor was talking about how like this guy was in this job, he was praying for a new job, he met with his community group, and like after a long time of searching and wanting a new job, he gets a new job, and he's praying and he's talking to his community group about taking it, and then everybody in the community group is like, yes, this is the Lord's provision over your life. This is a sign like you've been praying for. This is what you want. You're good at it. It's a better opportunity. And then everybody said that except for one. And one person in the community group says like, oh, do you really think God is done with you at this current job? Do you think that you've been salt and light? Do you think you've been able to do all that you can as a steward, or as a servant to the kingdom? And the guy ends up not taking the job he would have taken. The company goes under, everyone gets fired. Um, in the job that he stays in, his boss's son has some complications that he had also dealt with. The boss comes to him about advice with like I think it's just like mental illness and stuff like that, or um, just anxiety and things like that. So the person is able to help his boss's son. The boss's son gets better, becomes a believer. The boss becomes a believer, and then the guy gets promoted, and he's given more responsibility, more fulfillment, better paycheck, and all that. So, as that to say, is just like sometimes you got to be okay with the short term unknowns because of God's plan. And just me in my restlessness, I would say I that was something that I needed to hear.
That's good.
Just because I am like very maybe to a fault, just like very proactive, and don't always like sit and listen and be where my feet are. I'm thinking about going to the next thing, doing something better, um, and then also taking those steps to do that. But I think being where my feet are it's really important. So it was good to hear.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. And yeah, like God wants to bless you, and like God wants to pour favor on you. You know, God wants to
Mhm.
give you, in Psalms they call it a double portion, right? The King David described that as a double portion of what God wants to do in your life. So I really like that, and I think that's a powerful story. Made me think that, like, as it applies to your life, have in the past week, have you thought more about like the Solomon Project and actually reflecting on, um, like, giving yourself advice maybe when it actually comes to this subject?
I've not.
Okay.
Uh,
Because I mean, it sounds like a subject that, like, it takes some deeper thought and some deeper processing. So I was just curious if that was something you kind of explored.
I think I guess maybe this sermon that I listened to unintentionally um, was a was an answer to that. Just being where my feet are, being a servant, not necessarily um, not necessarily just always being trying to jump from one thing to the other. Um, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts swirling around that right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good,
But yeah,
dude. Who knows? Who would have thought we would have gone this deep, man? We're really breaking down, like, um,
yeah,
a
I see.
lot of uncovering of where this is going. So I really like it.
Yeah, I talked about it, launch out in the deep, and then here we are talking.
We're very getting very philosophical today. Um,
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. So where would you say do you think about what are your short term unknowns that consume your thoughts?
Dude, like, I'm at 100% commission job. Like, my bank account is a short-term unknown.
Yeah.
Like, my paycheck today is a short-term unknown.
Hmm.
Like, short-term unknowns is takes up majority of real estate in my mind.
Hmm.
It's like BlackRock private equity right now in terms of the real estate holdings they got. But
Good reference.
over $1 trillion for those who don't know. Anyway, yeah, no, dude. I mean, like, a lot of anxiety in terms of, like, if I'm gonna even have money to fill up my car and stuff like that. And, like, obviously, like, I know people, and, like, I'm never at a point where I'm ever gonna question if there's food on my table or a roof over my head or anything like that. But um, yeah, man. I mean, it's like you can go a month without getting paid in this business, so it's full of short-term unknowns. And
Mhm.
I'm not in the point in my career where the passive income um, is substantial. It's like a compounding effect, and it's going to take a little bit. But yeah, it definitely helps thinking about it in terms of, like, what really matters, and, like, what the end game is, and, like, do I really have to worry? Because, like, has God ever failed me before? Like, no, he hasn't. Like, should I ever believe that there's a reason why he would? No.
Mhm.
Like, so am I worried?
Mhm.
A little bit, but is it really something I'm worried about? No.
Got it. Got it. So you would say you're thinking about it correctly.
I would say, yeah, I mean, it's so applicable to my life because there's
Yeah.
so many unknowns. Well,
Mhm.
because, like, financial is, like, the only really the like what I'm kind of harping at here. Um, yeah, and, like, talking about launching into the deep, I mean, I moved across the country to start this business and to go 100% commission full time right away. Um, so, like, I jumped off the deep end into the pool, and
Nah, bro. You in the ocean.
we in the ocean.
Yeah.
We in the ocean.
Yeah. You're not in the deep end of the pool. You're in the deep end of the ocean.
Yeah, and it's the most competitive thing in the world is entrepreneurship and business ownership. Um, so I love it. I'm here for it, and I'm gonna be tough to beat because I'm not going away.
Look at you.
People are beating me right now, just to just be clear. The scoreboard is currently not in my favor.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, yeah, that I'd say that's a good stopping point. I think
Yeah,
we definitely talked about a lot, and
dude, I like it. Oh, I think a lot of the
Mhm,
topics kind of intertwined, intertwine,
mhm, mhm.
and
But it's
I think this is a good one.
yeah, I think this can definitely be something that we look back on and be like, hey, did we really know what we were talking about? Um, and one real quick, one thing I noticed with just the Bible study I was at, like these men that are in their 30s and 40s, they are so confident and they're also so honest in their shortcomings and they're so aware of where they need Jesus. It was eye opening to me to where like they knew exactly who they were, they knew who they weren't, and they 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 know what they don't know, and they're okay with that. So I think for us, this is, as we continue to talk about things like this, we don't know if we're if this is even like a if this discussion even has merit. We're not sure, but we're here, and we're bouncing ideas off each other, and it'll be interesting to see what we think about in the future, and and if this idea of the short term unknowns and long term knowns, like, is this something that um, we can take with us? So
And if it stands the
who
test
knows?
of time,
Who
if
knows? But
if it stands the test of time, like if it's never going to change, and like it's always going to be at a place where that short term and that long term just doesn't change.
hmm hmm
Cool. And I guess we'll be able to see because I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years, we'll be
hmm
able to have a different perspective shift, just like you said. So one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast is
hmm
so we can reflect on it. But other than that, great
yeah.
work. That just
Another week where you're in a button down and I haven't showered yet today, and I've got toothpaste stains on my sweatshirt.
yeah, and I got somebody in my waiting room, so I got to bounce. But it's been good chatting with you, brother.
All right.
Let's crush it this week, and I'll see you at the top.
I'll see you in the middle and at the bottom here too. We're not going anywhere. Um,
I'm looking right up the mountain.
that's
Cool.
true. All right.
All right.
See ya.
Peace.